All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining. Hopefully, you're starting to get settled as we get started with our session. My name is Jennifer Tasneem, and I'm the Career Services Coordinator here in the School of Chemical Sciences Career Services Office. And we are so excited to host our two SCS alumni, Jaconetty and Nan Jiang. And we're looking forward to having a great conversation with them. Just as a heads up, I am going to be recording this session so that other students who are not able to join us can view it later. But this is a networking session, so if you are able, please definitely turn on your camera so that our alums can see you. I'm sure they'd love to see you all and interact with you all instead of looking at your dark black screens. So would appreciate that if you are able to. But we're hoping to keep this session really interactive. So start to think about any questions that you have, any burning questions about law, legal careers, and anything regarding transitioning to law or pre-law related careers coming from a STEM background. So yeah, without any further ado, I also wanted to mention that I'm going to start with a poll just to get an idea of our students who are here, which year you're at, which background you're coming from. But if you have any questions and you're not comfortable sharing it with the larger audience, you can also feel free to message it to me directly, and I'm happy to ask those questions for you. All right, so I am going to start with the poll right now. So if you're able to take a minute or two to answer this question, just to get an idea of what year you are, if you're a first year, sophomore, junior, senior, a graduate student, or a postdoc, and get that idea from you. And if you can answer which discipline you are coming from, if you're an SCS student, great. If you're coming from another background, if you also wouldn't mind maybe putting it in the chat where you're coming from, that would be really appreciated. All right, I'm gonna keep the poll open for maybe 20 more seconds. All right, looks like everyone has answered, so I'll end it right now and share the results with you. All right, we have 2 first years here, 1 sophomore, 5 juniors, and 2 seniors. Awesome. So we have an all undergrad population here, and 1 person is from chemistry, 1 from chemical engineering, and we have a lot of other disciplines as well represented in our crowd. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat which major you're coming from, would love to know more about that. Okay, aerospace. All right, I'll stop sharing, but right now I would love to turn it over to our alums. Maybe we'll get started with Ken to just first introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves and what major they were here at when they were here at Illinois, and get started with our conversation.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I'm really happy to share whatever experience I had along the way. I'm retired at this point. I stopped working last year. And so as far as my background, I am a graduate of the School of Chemical Sciences, chemical. It used to be just chemical engineering. Now it's, as you probably know, chemical and biomolecular. Way back when I graduated in 1982. And I graduated during a recession, so it was hard to get a job right away. And I ended up being hired by the US Patent and Trademark Office. And that was my initial foray into the patent world. None of it was planned. That was the job opportunity I had, so I took it. And then I just based my career off that. One thing led to another, which I'm happy to go into in a little more detail later if it's useful. I worked for a law firm for a short period of time, and then I went into corporate practice, and I worked for a couple of different companies along the way. I ended the last 20 or so years in the pharmaceutical industry, where I have my most recent experience up till last year, as I mentioned. So look forward to taking on whatever questions, whatever sort of discussion that would be meaningful and useful for everyone.
I guess I'm next. It is a pleasure meeting you all. My name is Nan Jiang, and I am an open source counsel at eBay Inc. And I received my chemical engineering degree from University of Illinois in 2010. Very much like Ken, I graduated during the recession, the Great Recession of '08. So I kind of fell into law as well. My first job out of undergrad is actually getting hired by a law firm. So I was in a law clerk / technical advisor position, utilizing my chemical engineering background. So I spent about 7 years there working, and during the middle of working, I decided to go to law school. So I worked during the day and went to law school at night. And they brought me on as an associate, worked for another 5 years before I decided to transition into corporate practice. And before joining eBay, I spent a year at Samsung or Harman International, and then my advisor or manager from Harman decided to bring me into a startup company. And then now here I am. I'm happy to share any experience that you guys are interested in, or any questions you may have with regard to getting into the law, or intellectual property law or corporate law in general. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing that bit of introduction about yourselves. So both of you mentioned graduating during a recession. A lot of our students were here at Illinois during the COVID pandemic. A lot of them had their internships canceled or rescinded. Maybe thinking back to those times when you graduated, what advice do you have for students? And also with the economy that's coming up, who knows what's going to happen. So what advice do you have for our students who are graduating soon or who are looking for jobs either in STEM or if they're related in law types of careers, if you want to share any insight about that?
Yeah, who's going first?
Sure, I can. I mean, I think one of the things is keep an open mind. I think it's having your internship canceled is definitely it's very, very tough situation, and keeping an open mind, keep positive, and there's always something down the road for you. That's number one, because you don't really want to sink into this hole, and everybody's in the same boat. So you really want to keep an open mind and keep a positive attitude moving forward, and also explore different options that's available. So what that means is, when I went through this, I tried to apply to many jobs. Some of them are sales positions at Henkel, some of them are engineering positions at Procter & Gamble and Kimberly-Clark. Eventually economy recovers, and I had many interviews during that time, but the only thing that came up was the only offer I received was from the law firm. They really wanted me to be there. So, for me, I just kept my options open and decided to give law firm a try. And the worst thing could happen was I have 2 years of legal experiences going into something else, going to an engineering position, which would definitely benefit myself. That's what I thought. And then, it ended up, making a pretty nice career out of it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and it's the first thing that came to my mind as well. Last year I had the great pleasure and privilege too of giving the convocation to the department, and one of the key messages I tried to stress was pretty much that, which is your first job doesn't need to be your dream job. In fact, it's most of the time you don't even know what your dream job is, because your tastes can change. You don't have a lot of experience in different areas. And so what you may think is really what you want to do, may turn out to be the case, or it may turn out not to be the case. So the idea of being open to what comes along, I think is really, really important. I think, you know, and depending if you do get a couple of job offers, well, like to me, what was the most important thing was to get a good sense, as much as you can during an interview process, and sometimes you can't. But what to me is really the most important thing is who you're working with, the people that you're going to be surrounded with, the people who can mentor you. And to a certain extent, it's less exactly what you're doing, because it's whatever it is, it's not what you're going to be doing the rest of your career. So I think like building these relationships with good people at the beginning is sort of where my focus would be. And related to that too is because I'm on the advisory board of my law school. And what we talk about there, amongst other things, is not to hold out for your dream job, because for the same reason, when you're graduating from law, you may not be certain what your dream job is. And in the meantime, offers can come and go, and you know, anyone who goes to school these days likely graduates with a fair amount of debt. And so it's important to get working early, I think. So yeah, those are the sort of thoughts that come to my mind.
So that's all great advice. So at this time, students, if you have any questions, feel free to either unmute yourself and ask away, or you can also put them in the chat. But what do you all want to know more from Ken and Nan?
Hi, how are you guys? Oh, I saw just a question now. Is it okay that I go?
Yeah, Julia, you can go on first.
Okay, so I'd love to hear from either of you on this, but I have a relative who's an intellectual property attorney in Evanston. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with Stephen Steger, but I believe he worked elsewhere he was an electrical engineer originally from Marquette. So he had that bachelor, but he worked elsewhere for a bit before he even decided that he wanted to head to law school. So do you think there'd be any relevance in doing this before beginning an IP career, or would you say it doesn't really matter once you head into law school for that?
In my experience, it's quite common for people to work a couple years in the industry before heading into the law, mainly because the IP field is quite specialized. You know, many of the partners I worked for when I was at a law firm, they worked as an engineer, and then you know my mentor at a law firm, he was a director for the Atlas missile program before he would decide to go to Georgetown for law school and work as a patent examiner. It's quite common in the patent world, IP world, for somebody to gain industry experience before going to law school. And industry experience helps you quite a bit. I mean, you're going to start off knowing what a patent is, learning about a patent, and having an industrial technical experience is going to help you connect with your clients, which is the inventors, trying to get a basis of, you know, technical understanding of where they're coming from with regard to their invention.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me as well. And I think maybe similar to the path that Nan followed, I think in addition to getting experience in industry, like if you get a job as a chemical engineer or whatever sort of engineer you get your degree in, but you are quite certain, or you have a pretty good sense that you would like to go to law school, just because law school is so incredibly expensive, like a lot of graduate programs, but certainly law schools are expensive. And the law is it's a vague kind of nebulous area to most people, unless they have a family member, for example, who is practicing and from whom they can get an idea of what it's really like going into. I certainly didn't have that experience. There was no one in my family who was a lawyer. So I understand now it's quite common to take a gap year between undergraduate and law school to try to get a better sense of what law is like. And I was talking to a couple of friends who are still practicing in private practice, and one of them said that, and I want to get the term right here, that his firm, so he works for one of the bigger firms based in Chicago, Jenner and Block. And he was saying that his firm hires what are called, they're called project assistants. And what they are people who assist the paralegals, because you wouldn't have experience as a paralegal, you provide assistance to the paralegals. And he said it's kind of a lot of, running around doing things for people, but it gives you a really good idea of how the law firm operates, the sort of work they do, the sort of people that are there. It gives just a really good introduction to what working in the legal field is, because I think that's a really great asset to have, or experience to have before you actually decide to go to law school. Because I mean, statistically, I don't know what they say exactly, but a number of people get law degrees, and then after a few years working, they decide this isn't really what they wanted to do, or something doesn't resonate for them. So I think it's really good to get some experience in between undergraduate and law school, be it as an engineer in the field or in a law firm somehow.
Just to add to Ken's comment, and in addition to those project manager positions, law firms do hire law clerks, and also especially IP law firm or patent law firms, they're specialized into the fact that they have these trainee programs that they bring you up, from from a law clerk position into an associate full-fledged lawyer. One position that came to mind is the technical advisor position at Ropes and Gray. They actually offer to pay for your entire law school if you get into that program. So they do have quite a bit of motivation in training and hiring internally, because you get to know the partners as well as you get to know the legal field and the work being done.
Well, that sounds really good. I wasn't aware that Ropes had that program, but certainly, particularly if you have a scientific background that happens to really be in demand for the field that the law firm is working, they love to have people like that there. Like the last work I did in the company I worked for, they were focusing, like a lot of pharmaceutical companies, they were focusing on gene therapy and cell therapy. And believe me, older partners have no idea what that stuff is about. But so they need technical people who can educate them enough to do their work. And so, yeah, people with technical backgrounds can be super valuable in law firms.
And also they have companies have internships too. So in my last couple of jobs at Samsung, they have intellectual property law clerk positions, which I was the hiring manager for. Just be on the lookout for summer internships like those. Those will also get you into the door and see what's going on within a company and how law practices are going on internally within a corporation.
Awesome. Thank you. I wrote both of those down. Thank you both.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing those insights. We do have a few questions in the chat. So the first question is from Megan. She wanted to know, how have your chemical engineering degrees helped you in law? And did you start out just working with patents, or what kind of route did you pursue there?
So chemical engineering helped me quite a bit when I start my career at law. So when I first started at the law firm, we, being in the Detroit area, we kind of get a mixture of mainly automotive cases, but a mixture of good intellectual property cases ranging from, material science, agriculture, like pesticides, and also automotive parts and materials related to piston rings, and such. Without my background in chemical engineering, I probably would not have, or chemistry, I would not have understood what exactly is happening within, or be able to have an intelligent conversation with the inventor. I did not start off working at patents. I had several internships. During my time as undergrad, I worked for a printing company called EFI Jetreon in the research and development group. And also I worked for DuPont, division under DuPont. It used to be called Hercules Inc. I think it's called Solenis now. I was in their pulp and paper division as their technology intern, which is in the research R&D department. And also back at Illinois, I researched for the Suslick research group as well as the Craft research group. So I was kind of like into the research academic area before I landed in law.
Well, Nan, I worked at DuPont as well a number of years ago, but at their headquarters, which was a interesting experience. So I may have mentioned at the beginning when I was introducing myself, my first job out of U of I was as a patent examiner, and it was a great introduction to the patent world. It was back in the days where you had to live in Washington, D.C., or actually the patent offices wasn't at the time in Arlington, Virginia. I guess it's in Alexandria, Virginia now. You had to live on site, or there was no. Anyway, you had to be there. I think it's changed in the meantime. I know there are regional patent offices around the country, and I think they also allow remote work, as much as I guess I'm not a huge fan of working remotely full-time, at least. But being a patent examiner was a great introduction to the field, because you're working with patents, you're examining patent applications, and you're learning the process of how to prosecute, about arguments, legal arguments, how to refute them, how to strengthen your case. If the case goes to appeal, you learn how to draft appeal briefs. It was a really, really good experience. And so I look at that as a really viable pathway if you have a pretty strong idea that you would like to go into patents. Yeah, and also at the time, and I don't know if it's still the case, but the USPTO used to have a program for paying for law school. Like, you would have to commit to continue working at the USPTO for a certain length of time. And that's, of course, for people who are willing to do evening law school, which is, well, you're all young, you have a lot of energy. It's once you get into the rhythm of working during the day and studying at night and weekends and stuff, it goes by quite quickly, actually.
Thank you.
So the next question in the chat was, is IP law the only viable path for engineers with law degrees, or what can you say about that?
No, it is not. It is most definitely not. But you can't do the reverse. So you cannot have a liberal arts degree and become a patent lawyer. So to become a patent lawyer, you have to have a technical degree, but that's why it's so specialized. But your options are very, very open as a lawyer. While I was at a law firm, my work split between 50% is patent prosecution, writing patents, getting it through the patent office. About 30% of that, another 30% of it is corporate transactions. So I helped out with the corporate group on a lot of mergers and acquisition deals. And then 20% is litigation. So I helped out with the litigation partners with any of the cases they may have. And you may be initially, it's kind of like filling out your career. When you got first started at the law firm, you get sticked into this practice group, and then you kind of have a chance to, try different things as you move along your career and see what interests you. And at first I started off as a patent practitioner, and then I kind of moved into the M&A corporate world. And then I started, half of my time is mergers and acquisition right now in my position. Oh, no, sorry. Half of my time is patent management. And then the other half of my time is divided between, open source work, a lot of software licensing and supporting, and also supporting all the other inventors with regard to any of the questions they may have outside the patents. So yeah, you have a chance of try and feel it out, whatever you have, whatever interest you may have in the legal field.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point. And particularly the way you started out what you said, Nan, by saying you can start in IP, you can go with someone with a technical background, an engineering background, you can go into IP, but if you don't, you can't go into IP. And the same is true when you're practicing. You can start out as an IP lawyer, be it in a law firm or in a corporate setting, and you can transition into another area. It could be like I did a lot of M&A work myself, a lot of diligence in acquisitions. But I know a fair number of IP attorneys who decided they didn't want to just do IP anymore, and they transitioned into any sort of law. They, you know, if they were willing to learn different disciplines, and then they ended up doing contract law, or they ended up doing pure litigation that had nothing to do with IP, or some of them became general counsels. So like having an IP background. I think it keeps the door open for anything if you decide you want to move into another discipline. It's a good starting place.
Awesome, thank you. So Alex had a question in the chat. Had you not pursued IP law, what specialty would you have focused on, or would you have simply continued down a different path entirely?
Is that speaking to law? What other area of law, or even broader than that?
That's what I'm assuming, but Alex could probably clarify.
So
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ken.
I was gonna say, I'd start out just by saying that I really enjoyed transactions. So I did as I mentioned, I did the IP diligence for a lot of acquisitions. We didn't do any mergers, but a bunch of acquisitions. And to me, that was a lot of fun because it involved learning new technologies that we were considering, or products that we were considering acquiring. So I felt like I was still grounded in the technology. I was even learning stuff. So I was saying a little while ago that you've got older attorneys who are asked to do work in gene therapies and cell therapies. That was me. And so I used to be in these meetings where, the technical people were discussing what they were working on, cancer therapies and other sorts of therapies. And I would have Google opened on my lower screen, and they were using these terms. I had no idea what they were talking about. So I was Googling constantly these terms they were using. And somehow, it's like fake it until you make it. I was totally faking it, and I never really got busted. But I was having fun the whole time. I felt like I was learning new stuff. I liked the whole negotiation process. I love like meeting new people in the field. So that was an area that I found quite interesting. And I think if you decide you don't want to do pure IP law, then you start following more your gut and like, what are you good at, and where you're working, what do they really need? And then I think the rest kind of goes along. It just kind of follows from that.
Yeah, I agree with Ken's comment. And also similar to Ken, I kind of enjoy a mix of different IP laws. As you guys will know, patent law is part of IP law. There's also soft IP like trademarks and copyrights, and there's also what they call tech trans aspect of law. When I was an associate, I kind of volunteered for an assignment that helped out one of our clients with regard to some of the software agreement assessments, and I ended up enjoying that. That kind of started my journey as part of the tech trans group, and that included due diligence work, reviewing some privacy laws about data transfer. And also, here at eBay, everybody's AI is the key word this year, right? So everybody's doing AI. And for me, it's just you're not touching the old stuff all the time, right? So one day you could be doing e-commerce type of work at eBay, and all of a sudden there's a pivot towards AI, and all of a sudden you start learning a new whole aspect about large language models, or that type of thing. So it's really keeps you on your toes. And it's the same when you're going to a law firm too. No patent applications look the same. So you may get handed one application one day, the next time you get something completely different. And these kind of Illinois kind of provides you with a really nice technical background to say, hey, I'm comfortable picking up any technology that hits my desk, right? So that I think that's probably what I'm looking for is just something that just keeps my mind refreshed all the time, and it's quite exciting to be able to touch on different aspects of the technology.
Yeah, that's back to what you said at the beginning, being open, Nan, to different things. I think that is so important, because exactly what you described, like, in the competitive world that we live in, when when management hears that its competitors are moving into AI or moving into a different, therapy in the medical world, then they think, oh, should we be? Maybe we should. We don't want to be. We don't want to be behind. We don't. So they all of a sudden you're thrust in a whole different direction, and you've just got to go with the flow if you want to stay current and keep progressing. You got to go with the flow.
So before taking some more questions from the chat, I just wanted to ask, since we do have some students from other backgrounds like biomedical engineering, systems engineering, aerospace, what has your experience been working at each of your organizations? Have you worked with other engineers or other lawyers coming from different backgrounds, either STEM or whatever?
Yes. So as you guys will find out, when you go into law school, legal field is very small. You'll probably know people by name the more you progress down. And many of the lawyers you encounter, especially in the IP field, they have a technical degree, right? So they don't have to be in your chemical engineering technical background, but personally on my line of work, I've dealt with outside counsel. I've worked with outside counsel that has aerospace engineering backgrounds. They pivoted into e-commerce and e-commerce type of work, writing application for us. And there are some there are some engineers that just have computer science background, coming from eBay. So there's quite a bit of a mixture when you start, quite a bit of a mixture of different people and different backgrounds when you start working here. That's one of the things that I really enjoy about it is you learn something from there every day, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it seems like as technology progresses, it becomes more and more cross-disciplinary. Like it used to be like when I started out, each field was so siloed, and that just isn't what it's like today. And thankfully not, because different fields can obviously bring things to other fields, and there's synergy when that happens. And so that was my experience too, as I was working and what I alluded to earlier, that like I could never ever be a technical expert in a lot of the work I was doing, and I didn't need to be. So like, I said, fake it till you make it. That's actually okay. It's not anything to be embarrassed by. And I mean, in a related term, I think a number of people feel like they have imposter syndrome too, because they may not have specialized in whatever area they're working in now. But as we said, you can pick it up on the fly depending on what the area is, who you're working with. A lot like scientists that I work with love talking about the science they were doing. They love sharing it with you and teaching you to the extent that you needed to be. So there are so many ways you can be working in areas other than the particular one you may have studied at U of I.
Awesome, thank you. And I guess my question was kind of related to what Griffin mentioned in the chat, but this might be also dependent on each of the organizations that you worked in. But were there any like common technical backgrounds that people came from in each of your organizations or the colleagues that you worked with?
For me, it kind of depends. Well, it's a lawyer answer, so it really starts with depends. It depends on the technical background the firms are looking for. It depends on the need of the firm, right? So when the firm is expanding for a particular practice area, for example, life sciences, they'll be bringing in a lot of chemical, biomolecular engineers backgrounds. And if they're expanding in a mechanical space, they'll bring in a lot of mechanical engineers. It all depends on the size of their client. It all depends on how big their practice areas are. But that's from the firm's perspective. Now, coming from a corporate perspective, and most of them looks for relevant experience. So that your relevant experience, either at your firm or your previous jobs, becomes more important. Because when you're looking at it, they're just looking for eBay. When I apply for this position, do you have any experience related to computer science matters? I prosecuted many patents when I was at the law firm, computer science related, and also, my previous jobs, I worked with big data companies, and at Samsung, it was another big data or software driven side of side of technology. So coming in here is relatable experience going to the corporate side of things. So after a couple of years, I think your experience as an attorney really outshines your technical background.
Yeah, I agree. I think the same applies to, particularly when you're first starting out. Like when you're first starting out, of course, you don't have much experience. Maybe you've done some internships, but what law firms and what companies are looking for is, where did you study? Is it a prestigious school? Is it, it's superficial, quite frankly, but that's oftentimes what they're looking at first. But as soon as you pass that first gate and get your first position, then it's almost all about your experience of what did you do when you were working at whatever place, and what were your accomplishments, and you sell yourself based upon the practical work you did, not the not the prestige of the university you came from. Certainly some people are always going to be impressed by that, but it becomes less and less relevant the further away from your degree you are.
So another question in the chat that was here previously, what was kind of the work-life balance for IP lawyers or the legal careers in general?
I think it's a good question, and there's really two sides to this coin. So there's the law firm side, and there's the corporate side. So predictability is quite high for the law firm. You usually have a stack of cases waiting for you to get done when you arrive in the office on a day-to-day basis, because you typically have a log of things to get done, and you have a predictable schedule coming in. And then on a corporate side, sometimes on the law firm side, you can just go into your office, close your door, and never leave for the entire day. That could be your entire day at a law firm. In a corporate world, it's a little bit different because sometimes you get pulled into different meetings. In addition, you get last minute calls about specific projects, so it's a little bit more unpredictable in a corporate side. And typically I tell my manager that, I have a list of 5 things on the day. If I get down 2, that would be a good day for me, corporate side of things. So, maybe you can shine a little bit more light into your experience.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the particular situation, that's for sure. I know law firms have billable hours, and they can be pretty hard to meet. In fact, some of the partners I talk to these days, it's a challenge for new associates to meet their expected billable hours. But really, it depends on the firm. Certainly my experience was corporate, and I'd say, like, the intensity and the number of hours you put in really depended on a couple of things. One was, if you were doing litigation, as much as all in-house people hire outside counsel when they do litigation, it's always the case. You always have an outside lawyer that's helping you and going to court for you and stuff. Cases by their very nature, they become very intense very quickly when there are deadlines for filing briefs and stuff. And so if you choose the litigation routes in corporate practice, it can get pretty intense. That's for sure. But there are other areas in corporate law that are more regular, like Nan was saying, and you can kind of make a list of your priorities and stuff and discuss what really needs to get done and when with whoever you report to, and you can make it much more regular that way. So it depends on what your personality is like too. Some people thrive in these sort of high pressure situations. Others want something more 9 to 5, and that whatever makes sense in your particular case. I think there are positions that kind of align with both of those sort of work styles.
It's great to know. Julia mentioned in the chat that it's encouraging to hear that it wasn't uncommon for you not to be really familiar with all the terms and ideas that you were introduced to in the pharmaceutical patent industry. But especially to her as a chemistry student who doesn't have the deepest molecular biology background, what does IP look like in the pharmaceutical world specifically, and what would you say are some steps that she could take to land a position like this?
I say the most important thing, or the most helpful thing, maybe is a better way of putting it, and it's something I did a couple of times, is that, believe it or not, there are firms that specialize in training for IP attorneys for specific disciplines. And I attended a couple of trainings, some were in person, some were online, for cell technology, cell therapy and gene therapy. And they were fascinating because those areas to me are so fascinating. But things were broken down into basics and then built up so that you could understand it on the level at least that you needed to. And certainly if you wanted to really do a deep dive, there are tons of materials out there that you can look into. But this was really great, was that there are seminars you can attend that can give you enough basics to make yourself employable, to make you be able to do the sort of work, maybe not independently at first, but that can get you started. So it's again being curious and open to learning new stuff, because there are a lot of materials and as I said, seminars and stuff, online training out there that can help you.
In addition to that, I would suggest, one of the things that I've encountered when I was working at a law firm is that most people would just email some of the alumni from a school and just say, "Hey, can I shadow you for a day or two to see what you do?" I've seen that before. It actually happened to me once or twice. I have seen, while I was at Samsung, I have seen people that basically brought in a Michigan grad and they kind of just emailed their alumni directly over the summer and say, "Hey, can we chat for a minute and talk about what you do here?" These are very valuable options to get a good understanding of what the position is about, or what are some of the requirements for the position. That way you can basically try to align your goals with what the requirements are, and maybe that'll help you down the road.
Awesome. So, Ken and Nan, you gave both each like an overview of the types of things that you've done either at your previous or current institutions, but I'm wondering if you can give us more of a deep dive into each of the positions that you've held at each of the companies, and maybe give us a little bit more insight about the positions that you've had so far in a little bit more detail.
Sure. It's gonna take a little bit, but sure. So coming out of law school, I'm just gonna say the full-time positions, if that's okay, Jennifer. So coming out of law school, I started off as a law clerk at a law firm called Dickinson Wright. That law clerk, that position is basically a trainee position under a director of Intellectual Property Academy, which we learn about how to write patent applications, how to interview inventors, how to respond to communications from the patent office. Our director had a lot of personal clients, as well as we receive a bulk of work from our partners. That basically propped up our entire academy for supporting the work of associates, partners, and various different type of work required throughout the firm. For a good about 5.5 years or so, I did that, and then I passed the patent bar while I was in law school, so that allowed me to have signatory authority on my own work. So I was able to work a little bit on my own, and then shortly after passing the patent bar, I was up for basically graduation, and the firm made me an offer to come in as an associate. So throughout my time as an associate, it's just more or less the same. Kind of alluded to the billable model. You just do things faster, more efficient, and you get more expensive from a firm's billing point. So you do, more or less the same work, working with inventors, interviewing them, get their invention or their patent applications through the patent office. And on top of that, I was able to support litigation and also do corporate transaction and due diligence work whenever, our clients try to acquire a company. Midway through that, I kind of wanted to explore different things. I enjoyed working with people, but I just didn't, I just want to learn a little bit more about corporate law, because oftentimes you do the due diligence, you report it back, you just don't hear anything anymore. So out of curiosity, I kind of decided to go in house and dip my foot into the corporate law. And I ended up at Harman, which I was responsible, Harman International, which is a subsidiary under Samsung, which I was responsible for the consumer electronics, which you hear the AKG, JBL headphones, Mark Levinson, those type of headphones, as well as the Pro division. I managed the patent portfolio for all those. And also, I was in the litigation group, so I helped my manager, who is a litigation partner from Jenner and Block. I worked with him quite a bit to negotiate, hash out deals, do some tech trans work as well. I ended up really enjoying that. So I ended up, the manager I worked for, decided to leave, and then I decided to leave with her to a startup company to get my hand dirty on big data. The company at that time was working with a lot of autonomous vehicle. They do data analytics, and they use all the vehicle data from the big three OEMs, and they do, basically road analytics, and also they provide feedback to some of the autonomous vehicle developers. So as a way, I kind of got into the corporate agreement work because of the startup companies. So in addition to expanding the patent portfolio, I also did software agreements, open source agreements, all kinds of deals that we ran through the company. And then after that, I jumped into eBay because I enjoyed doing the tech trans and software type of work. So I ended up, eBay has one of three, their technology and grouped into one of 3 or 4 pillars, and I'm responsible for one of them. So I ran one of the divisions there, support, and also as part of the open source work, I'm a member of the open source committee at eBay. So I kind of help out the day-to-day on the software agreement side of things as well as the AI type of agreement type of stuff. So
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting background. Mine was maybe less diverse. I started out in a law firm, which, I mean, frankly, I think when you're out of law school, it's the patent office, as I said, is a good place to start if you want to go into patents. But law firms are really good places to start too, because you can get exposure to a lot of different areas. And the best sort of situation is where you're mentored by someone who's really helpful and from whom you can learn a lot of things, not just the law itself, but just how you sort of function in that, the structure of a law firm. Because like any structure, it could be a law firm, it could be a corporate structure, you have to get savvy at operating within a big organization, and there are pluses, and there are things that aren't so great, at least in my mind. But anyway, back to my story. So I worked in a law firm for a while, and then I went corporate pretty soon after that. I worked for a couple of years in a law firm, and then I was hired by a Swiss company, a Swiss pharmaceutical company, and that's what got me in pharma. And in fact, it got me in Switzerland. I lived in Switzerland for a number of years and worked in that area. And then I changed jobs, as it turned out, about every 4 years. 4 years later, I went to work for DuPont, but still in Switzerland. They I think still have their European headquarters in Switzerland. That was a great experience. And work-wise, it was a fascinating experience, just working with people from different cultures, and then having the chance of living in these cities. That was super memorable, and just a really great experience. And friendships and stuff that were made then. This is a long time ago now, that I still have today. So in fact, that's maybe another consideration is, the work, but also where are you doing the work? Because you're having a life outside work too. So it's not a bad consideration to have where you want to end up physically. So I did that for a few years and then I left again and I went to a startup company. I went to a pharma startup company in Germany for a few years. And that was fascinating too. It was a different culture, but it was also different work. And similar to what Nan said, that when you're in a startup company and there are only a few of you there and, oh, you have a legal degree, well, then can you look at this agreement and can you do, they just hope you can pick up other work apart from the IP work that, in fact, I was there to do. And that was a little challenging at first, but it was a great experience as well. And you pretty quickly learn that if you're reasonably intelligent and you're curious, you can learn all sorts of stuff and do it well, and without having the background training that maybe other people in the field have had. So part of it is just trusting yourself and again having good mentors and people to learn stuff from. So I did that for a few years at the startup company, and then I bailed because I didn't think it was going to be successful. And of course, after I left, it became successful. So that's fine too. But then I stayed in big companies and that worked out fine for me. Again, though, what I alluded to before is you have to start developing some savvy on how to operate in a big organization, because you have your boss to please, you want to get along with your colleagues, you want to there's sometimes competing interests, and you have to kind of follow your own compass in terms of some of the decisions you have to make that maybe not be obvious decisions. But that's all a part of growing, is there's not just the work, but there's the human element. And as you progress in any of these positions, you get more responsibility. You can have people reporting to you. And these are all sorts of new skill sets that you pick up along the way. If you want to, it comes down to you got to do what you want to do and what you're good at and what needs to be done. So the world just keeps getting bigger and bigger, I guess is how it starts feeling as you progress.
Awesome. Thanks for giving us a peek into your wonderful journey so far. All right, more questions from students? Anything that you're still confused about or things you want to learn more about?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can
Okay.
hear you.
What have you both found to be the most fulfilling parts of IP law, or maybe law in general? And then what have you found to be some of the biggest challenges? Whoever wants to.
Okay, sure. So the most fulfilling, I think it kind of changed as I progressed through my career thus far. So when I was at a law firm, the most fulfilling thing was getting that ribbon copy patent hitting your desk. It was the best feeling. It was the best feeling that kind of, reminded me that it's kind of cool to go through this. And many of the clients I represented at that time, it was, they range from big companies to startup companies. And one of those patents could mean millions of dollars in funding. So, one of the things that one of the other examples I would give is, for the time I was there within the academy as a trainee, we ended up building a 24-30 patent portfolio for a startup lighting company, in Michigan. And as we took the portfolio to, VCs, I met with the VCs, they were getting ready to sign about $50 million of checks or $10 million right at that. And so it was great that, you're being rewarded for the hard work that you've done. In corporate, I think it's more or less getting recognized for your work. It's thank yous from your clients. It's just small stuff like that. I actually help a division of eBay outside of China due to my language abilities. So many times the problem is that they're able to write, but they don't know how to write it in a way that could effectively communicate their thoughts and projects to their to the intellectual property committee internally here. So I was able to talk to them in Chinese and basically translate whatever they said and into the technical language that is required to be able to effectively communicate. And that way, the committee kind of serves as a gate process before they decide whether they want to move forward with the patent application or not. So going through the committee, helping them it's a great inventions are coming out of them, but helping them getting through the last hurdle was quite rewarding, I would say.
Yeah, I was just thinking about getting your first granted patent. That is pretty exciting.
Yep.
And I totally agree that what is enjoyable about a work and what is challenging about the work it just changes as you progress. And so in my experience, like I did a fair amount of litigation too, and so like it was great when you won the case, but somehow I got even more pleasure if I made a point, and this, albeit this was using a law firm, but if I would make arguments to the law firm that I thought were strong ones, and they got included in the briefs, and then the judge cited these particular arguments in the judge's decision, that was super rewarding. It just felt really good to have your point of view like acknowledged by the decision maker. That was really good. I would say later in my career, what was really, really rewarding for me, in fact, the last job I had, I quit and retired. I didn't use the word retired at the time, but that's what it's turned out to be. But I had a few people reporting to me, and I was working for a Japanese company where traditionally in Japanese companies, women have been discriminated against. They have not been promoted as easily and to the degree of that their male counterparts have been. And it had nothing to do with their capabilities. It was just because of that sort of prejudice in the country. So I made it a point when I knew I was going to leave, that I had a couple of people reporting to me, and I mentored them, and one of them was a woman. I mentored all of them, but she reached a point where I felt she was perfectly capable of taking over my position, and so I made that recommendation, and she was put in my position. So that was super, super rewarding. So those were rewarding things. The things that weren't so great were, for me, again, in the context of working in a large organization, because people being what people can be like, in most of the situations I was involved in, you had to do a fair amount of sucking up. you just had to do it because egos being what they are, particularly for some leaders, that's what they want you to do. And so then it's kind of you have to have a discussion with yourself, how much of this am I willing to do? And so there, for me, there were those sorts of challenges of like being true to yourself, but doing what you needed to do to progress, or if not, then saying this is not the right organization for me. So those were frankly the biggest challenges for me.
All right, thank you.
And you mentioned more of the rewarding parts. Any particular challenges that you want to talk about or share?
Yeah, sure. So couple of things I think challenges is that in a corporate setting, the unpredictability, and often it's caused by because I'm in the IP group. In my previous jobs, I haven't had this happening at eBay, but in my previous jobs, you get a call from the engineer and just say, "Hey, can I do this?" And you said, usually you say, "Hey, we like to take a look before you do this," and the engineer will respond and say, "Too late, I'm already do it now, clean it up," right? So that type of thing can increase the stress meter quite a bit. I think I enjoy the challenge of the job, but it's not something that I look forward to every day, right? So like I think more or less it's just unpredictability aspect of it. So you never know, you'll run into the mode of damage control. That's kind of the the challenging aspect of the job.
And I would add to that, like, and I guess similar to what I was saying before, this sort of people challenge aspect was in a corporate setting, because HR departments have so much power. They force upon you year-end reviews and progress reviews and yearly goals and all these, it becomes quite, and it was for me at least, kind of mechanical. Like everyone kind of knew what they needed to do and what the goals were, but it becomes this process of logging in and writing these sort of elaborate descriptions of what your goals are going to be and justifying what you did and how it takes it. I just hated doing it. You had to do it though, because it was part of the process. Um, so again, maybe that's just my bias against not spending a lot of time on stuff that I think is a bit stupid. Yeah.
Awesome. I had a question that now I'm blanking on, but any other questions from students in the meantime? Oh, I guess it came back to me. So Ken, you mentioned mentors, having mentors in some of your positions that have helped you immensely. Can you talk a little bit about that? How have your mentors helped, or how you even sought out mentors in each of the positions that you've had, and any advice for students who are seeking for mentors right now?
Yeah, and it was absolutely critical early in my career. The first position I had in the law firm, there were actually two people I considered mentors. They were more senior in the firm. One of them actually had come from the U.S. Patent Office, Board of Patent Appeals, whatever it's called now. And so they had this wealth of information, and they were far enough in their careers where they were, I think, quite comfortable in what they were doing, and they wanted to impart their wisdom. They wanted to share their experience. And I was just really fortunate, I think, to fall into that situation. And I certainly availed myself to it. So if they were looking for people to help them on projects, I would always volunteer if I had if I was able to, if I had the time to do it. And so, but I think this firm wasn't unusual in that respect. I think all firms have this. And so to me, that was an ideal situation, because you learn, there's only so much you can learn in books and by taking exams and stuff. It really comes down to, what you can learn from people who have actually done the work and have the experience and have the wisdom and are willing to share it. That was super, super critical. And that's what I guess scares me a little bit now, is where people are working remotely. I know there are a lot of hybrid situations, although the more people I talk to who are working in hybrid situations, they go into you can choose whatever days you want to go in the office. And it seems like the offices are empty whenever they go. And or people who are working 100% remotely. And I'm happy to hear Nan's thoughts on this too, because it's just, as we all know, from our interactions during COVID, just to interact and bond with and have meaningful conversations with colleagues that maybe isn't directly related to the work, but sometimes you just want to, chat about stuff. I guess you've got to just build time into that when you're working remotely, but it's critical. It's just critical to build these relationships, be it with a mentor or be it with colleagues, be it with anyone you're going to interact with, and you can learn from, and they can learn from you. I mean, that's the whole idea about collaboration and synergy between ideas between people. It's so, so important. So I'll turn it over to you, Nan, to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Ken, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I was very fortunate when I went into the IP Academy at Dickinson Wright. Our managing director, he had no billable responsibility. All he was there to do is to train young lawyers. So under his hand, he had about 5 or 6 partners that leveled up, that basically got picked from the academy all the way to the senior side of the firm. So we all saw what kind of progression and what his mentorship has been done So we kind of just use that as our goal and just, go to him for any advice that he may have, because his time was basically to us. That was very fortunate aspect. In a corporate setting, I think more or less the mentorship arise from the amount of time you spend with your manager on specific projects. I think, when I started, my manager fortunately was also an Illinois grad at Harman or Samsung. So he had a biochem background, and the two of us basically went through cases. We would just jump on calls. That was during the pandemic. So the two of us would just jump on calls anytime, we're available, trying to build that person to person, trying to fit that Zoom call as if we're person to person relationship, and we just chat about strategy. We talk about different things, and we would go out to lunch. We would just like manage some time, put some time on our calendar, and just go out to lunch and chat about things. So it is a little bit more effort consuming when you're doing remote type of work. But still, it's worthwhile to build this relationship, because he's the one that, credits to a lot to my manager. He was able to say, hey, I can help you get in to do some work with tech trans. You need to talk to certain people. What are your interests? How can I help? It was very fortunate to be able to have that type of relationship with my manager. And I do have that type of relationship with my manager now at eBay as well. Usually they start off with, what can I help you with? Do you have any questions? What are you struggling with? Those are type of the, I think in person is definitely a plus, being able to see people one-to-one. But without that, you kind of just, in this type of environment, you just kind of block out your calendars for those in-person Zoom calls, just to try to make it up for, try to make it up for going to office and just have a chat by the coffee maker or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting with how the world of work is changing, how you have to be really intentional if you're working remotely or hybrid to build those connections. But it's good to know how important building those connections are, and the power of Alumni alums who can help with that too. So I guess another question from Julia is, from what you've seen, would you say alumni are generally open to shadowing or willing to meet and network with recent graduates?
I'm certainly am. So I'm pretty convinced that because I came from Illinois, that's the reason why my previous manager at Samsung offered me a job. But I think it's more or less there's a commonality between the two of you that makes things a little bit easier to chat with. I think that's most definitely a plus at my end. Plus, not only just at Illinois, inside the University of Michigan Law School, they require the students to network every summer for at least 10 alumni, make out connections, and make sure that you have a summer internship already settled before returning for the second year, or already have some sort of interviewing progress. So University of Michigan actually promotes this type of alumni interactions. I think alumni to students interactions is definitely a type of connections that you can build upon for opportunities like these.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think another tool that has been proven to be really useful is LinkedIn. So I get a lot of contacts through LinkedIn just for this, exactly what you were looking for there. If not on-site shadowing, at least, we've had calls where we've discussed that sort of, these sorts of issues and experience. So yeah, like just taking that step of reaching out to people is, depending on your personality, it's easier for some than others, but almost no one ever turns it down. No one, like I would never turn down that sort of request, and I'm not special by any means in that respect.
Great. So I'm hoping you all will be open to connecting with students through LinkedIn and maybe talking to them and imparting your wisdom to them as well.
Absolutely.
Of course.
All right, so we have about 15 more minutes in the time of the session. Any last minute questions that you have for our alums?
As an engineering student, and I'm planning to take a year off after college to apply to law school. So I'm kind of trying to plan out what I want to do during my summers and then also during that year. Um, would you advise to do more like industry related things? My major is bioengineering, by the way. Would you advise to do more industry related things or maybe like law clerking or even just shadowing a lawyer for however much time during the summer?
I think shadowing time can be very limited. So, not all lawyers their office is going to be open for, months. They're probably the most I think I've done is probably a week at most, maybe 2 to 3 days. Also lawyers handle quite a bit of client confidentiality information. So having a shadow there could be a little bit detrimental. It all depends on your relationship. Um, what what I would suggest you is if you have industry experience, great, go ahead and utilize the opportunity. Once you have that, once you get into the company, reach out to the in-house counsels and have a chat with them. Just reach out to them and they will, like Ken said, they will be more than happy to talk to you about legal careers. I've had many people that basically, that came to our firm and said, I talked to so-and-so at my company, they recommended us to apply here, right? So there's quite a bit of navigation, quite a bit of options you can have. You can either work as a clerk, but if you ended up getting to a company, reach out to their in-house legal team and just say, hey, can I just sit in for like a week and just see how day-to-day, how can I help? And that type of thing. And also legal internships are available for companies too, for students who are interested in law. So be on the lookout for those opportunities. Those might be helpful for you as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think really if you are destined to go to law school, and at least that's how you're feeling, and you're going to go to law school, I think it's really important to get a taste of the law one way or another before you actually start law school, because it's, as we were saying before, it's really expensive. To me, law school was fun. I mean, there was work involved, but I love the intellectual stimulation of it. I found it fascinating. But I think it's really important to get a taste of what the actual work is like, because it's not for everyone, and not everyone knows that at the beginning. So that's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Also, how did you feel your experience in law school was compared to just like engineering school or undergrad? Did you find it easier or what did you think about it in general?
I say it's different. I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if it's the same thing for you, Ken, but I say it's different because engineering, so law school, in summary, based on my experience, is to train train you how to think, right? So, in engineering, we're used to specifically, use a formula to get to one answer. That's the right answer, and your work may or may not count towards credit. Law school is all about getting to the gray area. Like you will have stuff that's so gray that you can, like I said earlier, it depends. Almost all the answers you get picked from lectures. Almost all the answers. It depends if this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. So there's a lot of thinking involved in law school. Not necessarily like you have one answer that's absolutely the right answer. And I think I struggled with that quite a bit when I started off transitioning from engineering into law school. But the good news is statistically, engineers tend to do very well in law school.
100%. In fact, that was one of the first things we were told in my first law school class was exactly that engineers, because engineers tend to have analytical minds, and they can take the same analytical approach to a case and make a rational argument one way or another. You know, you could come out different ways, but as long as you bring a rational thought process to whatever position you're arguing, you're doing well. And you know, you're in law school with people, and there were certainly other engineers in my law school class, but most of them were poli-sci majors and, you know, some of the softer arts, and they did fine too. There's nothing wrong with that, but there are different approaches. They're just more comfortable with different approaches to law, and you know, ideally you adopt, you know, you try to your approach then adopts other techniques that are successful to, and this goes back to being open-minded and curious and stuff. I will say this about law school too, and it was 100% different from engineering. I mean, I studied really hard at U of I. I spent way too much time studying in retrospect. I got good grades, but I spent way too much time studying. In law school, and mind you, it was evening, so I was working full time, and I was dragging myself to law school, walking. I mean, it was down the street from where the law firm's office was. It wasn't a big deal getting there. But it was, you know, it was these were long days. And so I told someone, I in fact told the dean of the law school this recently, because I've got to know her pretty well. I said, one of the most memorable things, because she was we were sitting around a table and she was asking everyone, what was your most memorable experience in law school? And the first thing that came to mind, I said, and probably I shouldn't have, but it was, I learned how I could get through doing the least possible work. Is one of the things I learned in law school, was just getting by. And I mean, I'm not necessarily proud of that, but I guess the point is, you know, you've got limited time. You don't want to make yourself crazy. And there are situations where you do as much as you need to and no more, because there's nothing to be gained by going off the charts when you don't get anything in return for it. So like in law school, you want to pass the exams, you want to pass the bar exam, you want to do a good job, but you know, at least I was learning how to sort of meter my efforts to get by and not go crazy.
Great, thanks for sharing that. It's good to know that engineers maybe have a competitive advantage in law school, and sometimes even doing the minimum can help you get by. So that's good to hear. All right. Lauren, did you have a question?
I did. First, I wanted to say my apologies for walking in late. I just got in from lab, so I it's been a long day, but chemical engineering majors, so it's fine. It's the usual. But I'm applying to law school. I'm a senior. I just submitted my applications on Sunday, and I wanted to ask about some tips that you found were helpful in making the most out of your law school experience while you were there.
So part of things what I did is you know, Ken alluded to earlier, is that you know, being open-minded in law school, try different things. Wherever you ended up getting accepted to, they're gonna have these student clinics where you are able to practice as a student attorney. Those type of things I found to be very rewarding in law school. I helped a disabled mentor getting his first patent when I was a student attorney over at my law school. So that was one of the greatest achievements that I could say as a student attorney. So there's also different clinics, you know, there's free aid clinic, you can help out with, you know, pro bono type of work. And there's like, you know, there's M&A, mergers and acquisition clinics, you can help out. Law school experience is not just reading the case law and reciting the case law. I think there's quite a bit more involved. You know, being open, networking also helps with your future career. But I think the most rewarding thing is for me was to help, you know, to help out at the legal aid clinic and just, you know, have a different type of experience.
Yeah, that's all I can think of are clinics that legal departments have now. Sorry, law schools have now. And like I went to George Washington University Law School, and that's all we talk about, or that's a huge part of what we talk about, because to attract good professors, most professors want to run clinics, or many of them do, that are really interested in not only being professors, but making a difference of, using their legal degrees and their backgrounds to have an impact in the real world. And so that's been a big part of the focus of that particularly law school, is to attract professors, new professors or visiting professors to run clinics. And I completely agree that getting involved in the clinics that are of interest to you and that you can work into your time, super, super important, because it gives you a taste of the real world and why you're there in the first place. And to me, it's much more important than sticking your head in a book and being able to recite details of some old case that was decided, 40 years ago or whatever. So yeah, clinics are really, really, really important.
That's really good to hear. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and I'm not trying to sell George Washington University here, but a nice thing about it is that because it's in Washington, D.C., it had the opportunity for students to interview for internships at all sorts of agencies that are based in Washington, D.C. And, depending on what your particular area of interest is, you could oftentimes find an agency there that, you could, ideally get a position with and do an internship at. So that was, in terms of where you go location wise, that was a good benefit for that university.
Got it. And may I also add an additional question kind of related to choosing universities?
Absolutely, go ahead.
All right. Would you say that where you went to your university largely influenced kind of what you're able to do after you graduated, or would you say that it was more about the knowledge base and the connections that you made, and then you're able to kind of expand after that?
So that question in terms of law school or in terms of undergrad?
Oh, in terms of law school.
Okay, I think when I was choosing law school, I had a chance to leave Michigan to go to Boston for high school. There was basically a nice balance between whether I want to be in $180,000 of debt versus coming out of law school debt free and hit the ground running with the job already lined up for me. So there was a little bit of, in hindsight, looking back, it was like a non-issue. Just pick the one with the least risk on down the road. But one thing I think going from a good school does open doors for you. That I think is for sure. Especially when the big firms are recruiting, there are firms that just specifically designate specific school that only recruit from. Now, after your first job, your experience becomes more important. So we kind of talked about your experience, and going from a law firm to an in-house, they kind of always look at relevant experience, whether you have dealt with this before or anything else. Your degree from Harvard probably is just going to be a checkbox as opposed to or something else.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we did cover that a little bit before you were able to join. Just this idea of, some people are impressed by an Ivy League degree or something, but do you really want to work for people who are impressed that way? I don't think I would want to. And also, just I know a number of people, me included. I graduated from law school debt-free. The firm I was clerking at paid for my law school, albeit a lot less expensive way back when than it is now. But I don't know anyone who regretted making a decision based on the cost of law school to forego, one of these big name law schools in place of graduating without debt. That to me, it's huge. And it's, as we were saying earlier, your first job isn't going to be your last job. So it works out that way too. Just, looking at the finance side, making decisions that way. I think to me, that's a good idea.
That's
Yeah.
good to hear.
Yeah, just one more thing to add to Ken. There's this term from law firms, it's called golden handcuffs. So be aware of that. You get paid really nicely, but you have a lot of debt, so you are continuing to work there. So that's one trap you kind of want to avoid and open up your choices as well.
Yeah, particularly if you're interested in doing public interest law or interested in doing a law that does not pay the same, you don't get compensated you would being a litigation attorney in a big firm. If you don't have a big law school debt, then those options, you have many more options in terms of the area of law you may want to practice.
That's good to hear. I definitely I looked at the bigger name schools because doing the research, people are like, you have to go here, you have to do these. And I looked at it, I was like, I looked at the tuition and fees, and I'm like, I don't think I'm that interested in paying all of that for the rest of my life. So it's good to hear confirmation. I think it's one of those, just asking, like, well, is that a good decision to just go down the line of I'd rather reduce my costs, and that it's nice confirmation to hear that that's a good path to go down, instead of I need all the prestige and I need, the big name schools. So,
and one other thing, I know we're running out of time here, but is law school rankings change over the years? Like when I went to GW, it was so under Georgetown. It was like second choice back then. Now it's kind of comparable to it. So ratings change, and yeah, I wouldn't, yeah, I'd keep that in mind too.
Wonderful. With that note, we are right at time. So I just want to thank Ken and Nan for volunteering their time today on Giving Tuesday and giving back to their alma mater by talking to our current students who are interested in law or legal careers. I'm sure they also appreciated your insights and learned a lot. I know I certainly learned a lot, and hopefully I'm equipped much better to advise any of our students who are thinking of pursuing this route. So just thank you so much again. And students, I'm sure you want to share a virtual round of applause for our alums here. And as both Ken and Nan said, if you are interested to continue this conversation, feel free to reach out to them via LinkedIn. And you can definitely reach out if you want to have a one-on-one conversation with them if they have the time. So yeah, thank you for all your questions, and thank you for making this such a engaging and enjoyable session. So yeah, with that, I'd just like to close
Can
it
I
out
just
here.
add one addendum to what I just said? Because I was just
Yes.
thinking about how, I don't rule out these Ivy League prestige schools, because a lot of them offer there are scholarships available, and it requires looking at them and figuring out what you can qualify and stuff. And so, it's not 100% the case that if you go to Harvard, you're going to have a $200,000 debt at the end. So just, yeah, there are options that are worth pursuing in terms of how you pay for the education too.
Absolutely. And just as a reminder, this session was recorded, so if you missed any part of it, I'm going to be sharing this video on our YouTube channel, and you can find other career exploration videos there as well. But with that, thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Nice meeting you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.